NFL players cannot play in the NBA. Not even if some of them really wanted to, not even if some of them had Batman levels of hypothetical prep time. They just couldn't, all right? But if NBA players, if they really wanted to, I do believe that there are quite a few of them who could play in the NFL. This is something that I believe with close to 100% certainty at this point. I really don't think you can change my mind. In the big 2025, I think that we are now well beyond the point in just professional sports history where athletes could make the jump from the NFL to the NBA. I think that there is too big of a divide now. And I'm going to, one, argue that point in this video if you don't agree with me, but two, if you not only disagree with me, but are angered by the point that I have made so far, the argument that I have made, I want to change your mind about that. I want to make you not angry because I think that if that statement upsets you, the statement that NFL players are firmly incapable of doing what NBA players do, if you don't like that, if that doesn't sit right with you, I think you're missing the point of the NFL altogether, of football altogether. That is what this video is about. Now let's start with the initial claim here, right? Why am I thinking about this? What has me talking about NFL players making that jump or attempting to make that jump? Well, it starts with a tweet from Will Compton on March 18th of 2025. Will Compton, he's a former NFL player. He's a current podcaster. I think he was a linebacker in the league. Compton got his hands on a video of Steelers wide receiver DK Metcalf playing some pickup basketball, some semi-competitive runs, it seems. There's a nice little cut up here of DK dunking the basketball, completing an alley-oop, and hitting a jump shot. All right, he looks like a pretty solid player. Now, Compton found this video, maybe he assembled it, I don't know, and he tweeted, just watching DK Metcalf here, it's funny to me that people don't think NFL players could play in the NBA. And this post went really viral. It got 17 million views. 46,000 likes, 3.1 thousand bookmarks, 3.7 thousand retweets and quote tweets, and 3.9 thousand comments. People were really, really riled up about this. Now, judging from Compton's past history, just online, I mean, he's a professional attention getter, and judging off of his reply to his own tweet, I think we can all safely assume that to some extent this was intentional engagement bait from Compton. In his line of work, all attention, all publicity, it's all good, right? But that's not really the point though, not to me, because I'm not just talking to Will Compton here. I would have sent him a DM if that was the point. The point here is that this went really viral. 17 million impressions and counting. Why? It's because we all find this stuff really engaging. We love this debate. We love this hypothetical, swapping players between these two sports. It's been a subject of talk shows, TikToks, podcasts for years, for quite some time. And every single time this happens, it feels like the debate is never really settled. Because the next time that a Compton figure comes along and brings this question back up, people once again, they get really riled up. Now, I like this debate because I think it's a great fan perspective litmus test. It shows what kind of ball watcher you are, what kind of thinker you are, how you perceive the NBA in comparison to the NFL. And that's because, if I'm being honest here, there are kind of two sides to this. There is the side that believes that NFL players could make the jump, and then there is the side that is correct. There is the other side. There are those who are right. I'm going to make this really simple because it is really simple. You think about the best basketball players in NFL history, the best NFL players who have played basketball at some point in the past. You've got Antonio Gates, of course, the 6'4" power forward in college. I'm not totally sure that would translate. He was a great basketball player at the D1 level. Didn't quite make that jump, right? Didn't make the cut. You've got Jimmy Graham, another undersized big man turned NFL tight end, another D1 hooper. You've got Julius Peppers, who, like Jimmy Graham, was 6'7", a big man in basketball turned end of some sort in football. Darren Fells, Julius Thomas, Tony Gonzalez, of course, right? He's one of the biggest ones. And Quentin Rollins. These are some of the best guys in NFL history who have a background playing basketball of some sort. D1 basketball. Oh, and Mo Alley Cox, too. I forgot him. So a lot of ends, right? Defensive ends, tight ends. These guys were normally big men because they're big and strong when they played basketball, and they were good, but not good enough to make it to the NBA. Because in the NBA, normally you've got to be even bigger, even more skilled than what these D1 hoopers were. That is why they came over to football, and they were pretty good in football. They were welcome additions to the NFL. Furthermore, just the other day, I was on TikTok, and I came across a video of Bills wide receiver Keon Coleman He was pretty good at basketball. He went to Michigan State, Florida State. I believe those were the two schools. He listed his best basketball playing football players currently in the NFL, and he rattled off T. Higgins, Devontae Smith, and Devontae Adams. These are some good names, right? These are some good football players, really good football players who were good at basketball. Nowhere near NBA level. But how about we flip this? What about some NBA players with football backgrounds? Well, there's quite a few. There's actually too many for me to put in one video, and this is a bit trickier because normally, if you're playing basketball at the college level, you're not also going to play football at the college level. That's just too much wear and tear on the body. But we do have some guys with pretty impressive high school track records here. We've got Allen Iverson, who led his football team and basketball team in high school to state championships. He was a quarterback. LeBron James, of course. Former All-State wide receiver, former Browns head coach Eric Mangini said LeBron could have had a spot on his team, and Ohio State coach Jim Tressel admitted that he would have loved to have LeBron James as a Buckeye. Nate Robinson, 5'9", 1,200 rushing yards, 500 receiving yards, and 21 touchdowns in a season. Not too bad. Charlie Ward is actually the most fascinating name that's going to come up in this video because he's one of the only guys to actually do both. Back in a time where it was a little bit easier than now, that's a case that I would definitely make. This was like 30 years ago. He was drafted in the first round of the NFL draft. He went over to the NBA. Ben Wallace earned a football scholarship from Auburn when he was in high school. Jermaine O'Neal, he was a quarterback. Shaquille O'Neal, former tight end. I mean, can you even imagine? I can't. Like, I genuinely cannot imagine what that would have been like if he kept playing. Charles Barkley, he says he used to play football. There's a lot of names here, is my point, all right? There's a lot of guys in the NBA who played football at some point. And so far, I would argue that a common denominator here is the NBA guys, they had to give up football so that they could focus on their hoop dreams. And the football guys, well, they had to give up basketball because they were only good enough to go pro at one. But that's a little unfair, right? This is me just browsing a Sports Illustrated article and some NCAA article. Do we have anything more substantive? Well, yes, we absolutely do. And to bring up the more substantive stuff, let's do this. Let me ask you, who is maybe the best football player in NFL history that you could nominate to maybe play in the NBA if they really wanted to, if they had really tried? I think off the top of my head, I would have to think of a wide receiver, right? Somebody who's lanky, someone who's quick, someone with skills pertaining to an actual ball, right? You know, maybe good hands, good grip, all of that stuff. Somebody who can jump high. Randy Moss, maybe. What about Randy Moss? Why don't you take a listen to this interview that Randy Moss has with Kevin Garnett from back in the day?
So in a roundabout way, I kind of got depressed a little bit, you know what I'm saying? And just for the fact that I know I couldn't compete with you guys. And I got a funny story for you. All right, I know you're not going to remember this, but I do. I told you check ball. So this is really what discouraged me. You and Shea Cotton helped me go to football. So I stuttered, then tried to go to the hole real quick. Laid that thing high off the glass where that white box is. You went up there and cleaned my ball. You went up there and cleaned it. So when you went up there and cleaned it, I looked up there and I'm like, man, he can jump that high.
And we in Indianapolis.
Yeah, so it was just a lot of guys that, you know, you, Vince Carter.
I remember I was there. I remember a bunch of guys.
A lot of guys, man.
T. Higgins has a very similar anecdote out there. A lot of players have very similar anecdotes out there because this is a pretty universal experience for football players. They realized at some point that they just didn't have the athleticism, the combination of height, speed, quickness, and skill to make it to the NBA. Not even our hypothetical greats, our Randy Mosses, all right? But Anthony, it goes both ways. There's a lot of basketball players who couldn't handle the toughness of the NFL. Okay, so why did the Panthers just bring in 6'9" power forward from Coastal Carolina, Colin Granger, to their team to give him a shot, to give him a go at it? We're talking about Coastal Carolina here, all right? If NFL teams are comfortable taking a risk on this sort of guy just because he's available, do you really mean to tell me that they wouldn't take a risk on NBA players if those guys were available? It's just not even here. If we're doing the skill thing, there's also that entire aspect. You have to actually be able to hit enough shots, dribble the basketball well enough. This can't just be a physicals profile thing. It's not just about your strength and your jumping ability. As my friend Jack recently put it on Twitter, if you want to make it to the NBA at the height of about 6'4" or below, right, which is what most of these NFL nominees are, you have to be one of the 100 most skilled basketball players in the world. You have to be able to hit about 90 open threes on 100 attempts in an open gym. Don't get me started on contested things. Don't get me started on your actual dribbling ability. Don't get me started on defense. None of it. You have to actually be that good at the skill part if you just fit the physical archetype. You gotta be really, really good here. I'm going to try and find the TikTok. If I can insert it, I will, but I came across a video not too long ago of a former D2 hooper talking about his experience applying to play D2 basketball at some school. He was attempting to transfer there, and part of his transfer process, part of his application to the team, was he had to go to an open gym and shoot 100 threes consecutively, recording the entire thing, and send it to the coach from a bunch of different spots. No cuts, no breaks, none of that. And he had to make as many as he could, all right? He says that he hit, I believe it was like 75, something like that, 75 or 80. He felt pretty good about that. He sent that video to this D2 basketball coach, and the coach looked it over and said, you know what, we'll pass. The coach said that that wasn't going to be good enough for their roster because they were a very pace and space oriented sort of basketball team. That's D2, all right? That's not even D1. That's not even lower D1. That's not upper D1, and that's definitely not the NBA we're talking about. My mind is really made up here. NFL players, they just don't have the skill necessary to play in the NBA because, one, the NBA has some of the biggest freak athletes on the planet in terms of sheer height, weight, speed, jumping ability, coordination ability, that combination. And then, two, people who have actually worked on these skills, focused on these skills their entire lives. And if you still disagree, perfect, because I saved the most important point for last. If they could, they would. Go take a look at, like, Aaron Gordon's contract. Go take a look at Buddy Hield's contract. Role players in the NBA make more money than NFL superstars. If NFL players could make more money, they would make more money. And I hate to dumb things down to money because sports it's a lot bigger than just the paycheck here. But NFL players, if they could provide their family, their future family, generational wealth, if they could do that, they would do that. So yes, this debate, it remains a hypothetical. And yes, football players, they do have very unique, specialized talents. Their ability to be, like 300 pounds and agile in their lower half, their abilities to anchor, their grip strength, all of these really specific things that running backs, wide receivers, tackles, edge rushers, all these things that they work on that make them great, these are things that NFL players, they currently can do that NBA players would not be able to do today. But think about how many players there are in the NFL who didn't start playing football until they were like 17 or 18. Think about how many players have been drafted to NFL teams while playing less than, say, 20 career games at the college level. To argue that these non-inherited traits from NFL players are things that NBA players could not pick up on if they worked hard enough for long enough, I think that's hubris. I think that's arrogance, and I think that is not true. Furthermore, I think that not to glaze here, but if we were assembling sports players from any one league, from any one sport in the world, and just trying to decide who we should give super soldier serum to, who the best athletes on the planet already are, what the closest thing we have currently to super soldiers is, it's basketball players. I know that athleticism doesn't really have a specific fit definition. A 4'11" gymnast in many ways is more athletic than some other professional athletes who are taller, faster, and stronger will ever be. But if you're just taking athleticism, that word, at face value, and assigning traits that would make the most sense just like in a vacuum, I think we would say it is the person who is the largest in terms of height and weight, the person who can run the fastest, the person who can jump the highest, and the person who is the most coordinated. I think that if we had to nominate people from one sport on this planet to represent our species, it would be NBA players. And again, that kind of sounds like a crazy take, but it really shouldn't be, because what other sport even comes close here? Now hold on, let's stop right here, because I'm a football guy. And for however many minutes there have been that have passed in this video so far, I'm sure it certainly hasn't sounded like that, right? I've done nothing but put down NFL athletes while elevating NBA athletes. And we are talking about athletes here. We're talking about professional athletes playing professional sports. If the point of watching professional anything, professional entertainers, professional artists, professional athletes do what they do, if the point of watching professionals perform is to see the best people in the world at something, is to watch them master their craft, doesn't it kind of suck to have to acknowledge, to have to maybe realize that our favorites, our best representatives aren't actually the best at something, that there are other people out there who, if they so pleased, could be better, that's kind of a bad feeling, right? That sucks. Why are you even making that case, Anthony? What do you gain from this? That's what I want to focus on here, because I actually say no. That's not the point. That is not why we watch professionals, and that is why I believe if the take that NBA players are better athletes than NFL players upsets you, you're missing the point of the sport. You're missing the point of the NFL. Furthermore, I would make the argument to you that if anything, this cements the beauty of the NFL even more, accepting that they're not the best athletes on the planet. And here's why I believe that. So recently I came across a video from YouTuber Michael McKelvey. He's a guy I've talked about before on this channel, on the subject of range in sports, on the subject of athletes in one profession, athletes of one sport, playing other sports, having sport range, specializing on more than one task, more than one game, before ultimately finally pivoting to one that they want to make money from, pivoting to one thing that they can be the best at. McKelvey's video, it's really interesting. It's all about sports circuits, and it's all about which athletes in which sports have the widest range, which guys do the most for the longest. I highly recommend you check it out. I've cited his work before, like I said. But there was one chart brought up in McKelvey's video that really caught my attention. It's a scientific paper, an analysis of sports specialization in NCAA Division I college athletics. Which players in which sports had the widest range before finally pivoting to the one sport that they have chosen to play. There's a table here that McKelvey presented in his video that I could not look away from because I think it made my argument here for me perfectly. If we take a look at this chart of D1 athletes, we can see, on average, the age in which players from these sports began to finally focus on just their one task, just this one thing that they want to go pro in. We can see that for basketball, the average specialization age is 14 years old. On average, professional basketball players, D1 basketball players, they specialize in basketball pretty young, right after turning 14, before they can even get their learner's permit, all right? That's pretty early. We can see that this age is also pretty young for tennis, for swimming and diving. Track and field, it's right about 16. Baseball, it's right about 16. Wrestling, it's right about 13. I used to wrestle. I can tell you, you can really tell those guys started early. They're all about like 5'2" because of all of that weight cutting. Some of the most unique builds you will ever see. But then as we go towards the top of this chart, well, there's football. Average specialization age, almost 18 years. Now, I don't know how you're interpreting that, but you know what that looks like to me? That looks like football players generally give a lot of other sports a go before really settling on the one. Maybe they're trying to go pro in these other sports. Maybe they just enjoy playing these other sports, but they sure as hell didn't say at a young age, I just want to dedicate all of my time, all of my resources, and all of my energy to this one game. Maybe that's a money thing. Maybe that's a wear and tear thing. Maybe that's a nature of the game thing. I mean, the football season, it's pretty short. There's a lot of players on a team. It's a lot harder to stand out sometimes in this game, and you have to have your body develop in a different way. You've got to get big. You've got to put on muscle. You can't do that at 14. Either way, all of these points amount to what I think is the most interesting point of all here. Specialization, or lack thereof, tells the story of the difference entirely between the NBA and the NFL. We're talking about one of the youngest specialization ages versus one of the oldest. Now, I love the NBA. I consume a lot of NBA content, a lot of NBA games, and I listen to a lot of knowledgeable NBA creators. But one thing that I think I can say with a decent level of confidence, a decent level of certainty here, is that the NBA is more criticized than the NFL. I would wager that a larger portion of NBA discourse is negative relative to NFL discourse. And I think that's for a couple of reasons. Number one, because I don't want to get too off track here, is game presentation. The commentators in the sport, they're not the best. They often critique the modern game. They don't like to watch players evolve and be better than how good they used to be. You saw this a lot during like All-Star Weekend. There were a lot of commercial breaks, a lot of negative opinions, and a lot of bad basketball analysis. These guys in these booths, these guys with these microphones, they're getting by on personality and not actual smarts. I think that's point one. Reason number two here, I would say, is maybe the nature of the game. I don't know if you've ever heard arguments about Elam ending in basketball, but I'm sure you've heard arguments that the way that basketball games currently end, with all of the fouling, the clock stoppages, all of that, that's just not pleasant. That's not a great viewing experience. And on top of that, you hear a lot of people complain about threes in basketball, how often they're being taken. I firmly disagree with that take, by the way, but that's another thing that you hear complained about in basketball is just the nature of the sport. But reason number 3 here, why I think you hear basketball get complained about a lot, is culture stuff. I think that a lot of people don't like the way that basketball players have evolved. They don't like these AAU circuits from really young ages. They don't like the idea that these kids are being bred to play basketball, so to speak. The idea that these kids are missing out on the college experience. The idea that these kids are hopping in high school. The idea that these kids are just basketball players, super soldiers from really young ages until they get to the league. And when they're in the league, they just want to make as much money as possible. I think that rubs some people the wrong way. Again, I really like the NBA, and I think that this past NBA season is one of the best I've ever seen, but these are complaints that I think you hear a lot, and I think much like Compton and his post going viral about DK Metcalf playing basketball, it's not the nature of the thing itself that I find worth talking about. It's not Will Compton's opinion. It's not these NBA critiques that I find interesting. It's the fact that these things go viral. The fact that these things are commonly heard, commonly believed. I disagree with both Compton and with these NBA critiques, but my point in both cases is that virality, this symptom, it's worth investigating. NBA complaints are worth investigating, and I think that these NBA complaints, to me, do stem from specialization in some part. That's the point I'm trying to get at here. I think that a lot of people find American basketball culture to have become somewhat soulless. I don't think that's entirely true, but I do think that it is true to some extent, and I think that's why some of the most exciting basketball players now are from other countries, where the game is approached differently, where basketball plays a different cultural role, where the stories are more promising, where the narratives are cooler. A lot of US basketball player narratives, they're not that exciting anymore. It's just like social media stuff since the kids were like 13. If we're doing the ratings game, the NFL is more popular than the NBA by a lot. And if we're doing the discourse game, just as somebody who likes to think that they have their thumb on the pulse, I would say that the NFL, again, beats the NBA. People like the NFL more than they like the NBA if we're doing like a popularity contest among the masses. And I think, like I just said, that has to do with specialization. That has to do with specialization or a lack thereof. Quick but necessary disclaimer, I'm not saying primarily specialization. I believe that the NBA itself would be directly on par with the NFL if they made a couple of changes to the regular season and to the rules, and specifically to the broadcasting. But I do think that specialization is a part of the puzzle. I hope I have made that clear by now, but if not, let me do that one more time before diving into this final part. Football, again going back to that table that I previously showed, is one of the least specialization-oriented sports out there. It brings in athletes from the most diverse backgrounds by far. And if we're just talking about the types of people who get to play football, well, shapes and size-wise, it brings in, again, possibly the most diverse grouping of individuals. Short guys, tall guys, fat guys, small guys. In fact, last year in the NFL draft, in the first round, so of the 32 best college players that the game had to offer to the NFL, 29 of these 32 guys, they were multi-sport athletes in high school. Over half of them competed in track and field, and 12 of the 32 were 3+ sport athletes. That's the type of difference we're talking about here. An average specialization age of 14 versus this. Again, point being, the NFL is really diverse. And what does diversity lead to in this 11 on 11 game, where fundamentally, position-wise, things are already more diverse? Well, it leads to countless late bloomers, countless 0-star recruits turned into pro athletes, an odd number of non-first round pick quarterbacks, sometimes quarterbacks picked as far back as the 6th round, sometimes quarterbacks picked as far back as the last pick in the NFL draft, attending Super Bowls, winning Super Bowls, maybe even becoming the GOAT. We get deeper drafts. On average, I believe most NFL starters that hang around in the league, they were found in the 3rd round or later. I think that this also leads to a more diverse college landscape, I would say, just in terms of what shapes up, what pans out. We are provided with far less predictable development landscapes. I think that might be the biggest point of all here. Sometimes people don't become good NFL players until like their 4th or 5th year. Sometimes far later than that. Underdogs, Cinderella stories, things that are, one, synonymous with good narratives, good storytelling, but two, synonymous with sorry to get corny here, the American dream, all of this stemming from late specialization ages, I think that is what amounts to the NFL being the most popular sports league in the entire world. I think that parity stems from this diversity. I think that our narrative diversity stems from this specialization diversity. I think that these fun little quirks of all of these NFL players, things that you'll learn about them years into their career, Xavier Legette loving to ride horses in the offseason, Tristan Wirfs going on a podcast this past week and talking about how important his other sports were to his development, Kobe Turner being a musician on the side, Travis Hunter being an elite fisherman. I'm not trying to make the case that the NBA doesn't have these things, but I will say that this culture, this soul, I don't know, whatever word you want to use, I really don't want to sound like I'm putting down the NBA. These are things that the NFL has in abundance, and it stems from the nature of the game, which is tied to specialization and the lack thereof. Early specialization has not killed a lot of different sports, but it has done damage to their culture in America, I would say. And I think that's a point that Michael McKelvey gets at really effectively in his video. He talks about youth sports circuits. He talks about how these things are cash grabs for parents, how they sell you hopes and dreams, how they sell your child hopes and dreams, and then how they in turn wear you down and they rob you of these dreams, because the cold, hard truth, the fact of the matter here is that only so many people actually get to go pro in every sport. I think that that is something that we have yet to really see from football. I think you could make the argument that basketball is a bit more individualistic, at least in America. I think you could make a similar argument in baseball. I think you could make a similar argument in most team sports, except for this one, because of the 11 on 11 nature, because of the cultural aspect, just the role that coaches play, all of that stuff. I don't want to sound unscientific here, but these are things that I loosely believe and that I firmly appreciate. So yeah, sure, these athletes may not have been born with the super soldier serum that is so common among NBA players. And sure, NFL players still are oftentimes, in their own right, genetic freaks. I mean, these guys are far from normal people. But football, I believe, stands out because of its flaws. It's a game of toughness, hard work, teamwork, innovation, and most importantly, compensation. Overcoming whatever hand you were dealt, be it your own nature or be it the nature of your surroundings. Overcoming all of that, overcoming that adversity, and doing whatever it takes to reach the mountaintop. Because team sports, they've never been about individual athletic capabilities, individual athletic potential. If that was the case, we would be demanding that the Olympics happen every couple of months, and we'd be watching track and field all of the time. No, team sports, I think, are about humanity, about relatability, about finding common cause in struggle. Again, about overcoming adversity, about communication, about togetherness. I think that these are things that the NFL brings to the table in a really unique way that not just the NBA, but no other sports league can compare to. And that is why I love this game. Athleticism, that's just an accessory here to me. In other words, any day of the week, I would rather watch a great story with poor actors than a poor story with great actors. Most major sports leagues, they've got both. They've got pretty great stories and pretty great actors. But if I had to put my money on just one, I know which one it would be. And I know why. Because to conclude here, life, sports, success in any field, it's not about what you can't do, and it's definitely not about what you could have done. It's about what you actually do. And I think that's really cool. Thank you for watching this video. I know it was probably a bit less efficient than some of my other ones. This was a bit more conversational, less scripted. But I just kind of wanted to talk around the role that athleticism actually plays in the sports that we watch. How important is it to us that our athletes are the best in the world, point blank period? And how important is everything else? How important is the rest? I think that the rest matters a lot more than most of us realize, and I think that that is embodied by the success of football. Again, one last time, I do love the NBA. I think that the NBA has some fantastic stories and some fantastic players, but I do think that underdog stories are far more common in the NFL, and that's why, to some extent, I think I would label this video as an ode to the underdog. Perhaps I'll put that in the title somewhere in the thumbnail. But yeah, that's why I love football. Thank you for watching. Hopefully, you'll come back next week for whatever I have planned next. And in the meantime, I hope you leave something in the comments, as per always. I hope you help me keep the conversation going. See ya.